Welcome all to the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast. If you like going off-roading in Toyotas, wrenching on Toyotas, camping in Toyotas, and maybe even poking a little bit of fun at Toyotas, and of course, hearing about how fantastic air systems are in Toyotas, then this is the podcast for you. That's right, ladies and germs. My name is Tyler, and joining me today for another episode 451. That's a lot of episodes, is my good buddy, Mr. Jimmy Hydrojet. Hydro, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. You enjoying the lead up to the holidays?
Yeah, for the most part. I've already gotten a little bit of shopping, very little bit of shopping done, but
nice.
I'm trying to get ahead of the game better than I did last year. So, but like every year, for the most part, my one side of my family does an exchange during Thanksgiving.
Okay. And
so once I get those presents purchased, that's like half my family done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be nice. And then I just have to concentrate on the other side of the family.
Yeah. That's 2 weeks away.
I know. Yeah. I only have like two or three more presents to get. So
okay.
Not too shabby. Yeah. I don't know what the assistant's super cool, because what she does is she really says you buy for your family and I'm going to buy for my family.
Oh, okay.
And that way I don't have to think about getting a present, for her dad or her mother. It's just, it's a present from us.
Yeah.
I don't know if other families do it that way or if you do it that way, but it's kind of nice to, like, I know my family better than I know her family.
Yeah.
And, it's my family's smaller than her family. And so it just works out in my favor. So it's kind of cool.
Gotcha. Nice. Yeah. That's we just do a white elephant kind of thing.
That's right.
So, for my family, at least, we do a white elephant. So everybody brings one or two gifts, depending on how many numbers you want to get. And then we do a white elephant exchange, right?
Sure.
But then the secretary's family does like a full on gift thing with multiple gifts.
Yeah.
And
that's how my immediate family is.
Gotcha.
And then we go to some parties on the assistant side of the family. And one of them's a white elephant. And the other one's sort of a sit down, but you just buy like one present for the adults.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, cool. Good luck with your shopping.
Thanks. You too.
Yeah.
I already bought one of your presents.
Did you?
I did.
Wow.
In a pre-Black Friday sale.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. Is it a catalytic converter?
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
I don't need one of those right now, though.
Oh. We'll find out why here in a little bit.
Maybe. I don't know about this episode. I don't know if we'll talk about it in this episode. So, let's see. This is a Thursday episode, but we're going to do things a little bit differently because of the holiday going on this month, Thanksgiving. And one of the other planned episodes we had for Monday coming up. So we're going to talk about kind of a main topic today on a Thursday, of campfire discussion rather than what we've been up to. So, we'll get into that in a little bit here. We have a little bit of housekeeping. So this month we are giving away a new PSI Pro compressor from Morphlate, one of our Gen 2 compressors. So we've made quite a few changes, a couple externally and a lot internally on these compressors to make them last longer and withstand heat and longer duty cycles better. So should greatly improve the lifespan of these kind of stand-up compressors. So we'll get into that. I think some more of the changes, maybe a little bit in the discussion today. But if you guys want to get in for that giveaway, make sure you go over to irate4x4.com and click down in the Snail Trail forum. And then all your sign up options are there on the right hand side if you're on a computer, and at the bottom of this page if you're on a mobile device. So you need to be signed up for at least the giveaway tier, and the gift box tier is all closed up. So if you didn't get in on that last month, you are donezo. You're not able to get in. Your only option is that giveaway tier or the one right below it.
Yeah, you can still donate $20, but
yeah,
you're not going to be getting a gift box.
Yeah. So let's see. That's the giveaway stuff. What else do we got for housekeeping?
We could do reviews. Do we have any additional phone calls?
Negative.
Okay.
No more voicemails.
And I think we've got a lengthy discussion today, so I vote for skipping reviews. But if you want to leave a review on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcast or whatever they're calling it, speaking of that, remind me off air, there's some things happening on the back end of Apple that don't really super affect us, but is actually to our benefit to some extent.
Cool.
Things that we're already doing, and now Apple's actually implementing it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, but if you want to get in for some swag packs, we give a swag pack away every 50 reviews. So I think we're coming up pretty quick on, is it 600?
600 is what we're coming up on.
Yeah, if we're not there already. And then at 650, 700. And then at 750 reviews, we're giving away a set of tires from Yokohama Tire.
So, yeah, cool stuff from Yokohama.
Cool stuff from Morflate.
From Morflate, yep.
You got that 10-6 up 10-6 there for grabs in that giveaway tier. So thank you, Morflate, for that. Are you going, or are you invited to go to the toy drive on the 2nd?
I'm probably invited. I don't. Which toy drive?
It's the Hella Trails.
Oh,
NorCal Toy Drive.
Negative. I had not heard anything about that.
Yeah. It's happening at Bay Area Metal Fab down in Benicia.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nobody's reached out to me about it. So
Norris, I'm pretty sure. Well, Norris tagged Morflate, I think.
That's not me.
Yeah.
So
in the giveaway post.
Gotcha.
So if you want in there, I'm sure they would accept you.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'll be there for a short period of time, and I will be donating a panel. And
December 2nd, I'll be out of town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can bring stuff down if you need it.
I hope, Mike, if you're listening, reach out to me, because I don't think we were donating anything to that. If you're expecting Morflate to be there and donate stuff, we don't have it on the calendar for anything. So
yeah, I don't think he listens anymore.
I don't either.
Mainly, the reason I think that is because he was a Patreon subscriber, and now he didn't move over. So
yeah.
I don't think he listens.
Yeah, that'd be my guess.
Yeah. But he reached out, and rumor has it he might be moving back to NorCal soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Already? You got fed up with SoCal?
Yeah. There's no wheeling down there.
No, there's not.
Except for desert. And it's coming up to be desert time. So speaking of that, Weld's Taco just took his Forerunner out to Cougar Buttes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I can't wait to hear how well it did with that 3-link.
He did all the 3-link stuff, right?
Custom 3-link, yeah. So
yeah.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, sweet. I have not done Cougar Buttes yet.
I have never done it either.
Yeah, I need to get out there. Hopefully this year at KOH.
Yeah,
that's kind of on one of my bucket list items for KOH this year.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I do have a surprise
for me
for Morflate. Kind of for Morflate. Morflate is buying something.
Oh,
for winter.
Oh.
And I'm gonna keep it a secret, but I'm getting really antsy. I've been keeping it a secret for a little bit here. I'm getting antsy about it, and I might be receiving them this week.
Wow!
So
I think I know what it is.
We'll see.
I think everybody knows what it is. If it's for winter,
yeah, it's for winter and only for winter. Yeah. So. We'll get some pictures once they come in. Yeah. You
got a ski-doo.
I got a big old ski-doo to ride around.
Not a ski-doo. That's jet skis, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna go ride around on Loon Lake doing a jet ski.
Yeah, that's what it is.
When it's frozen over.
Oh man, in a dry suit maybe.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I don't know of any other updates. Episode 450 was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
We had at least my side of the family had a blast.
Oh, good. Mine did.
Good. Yeah. Glad. Happy to hear that. The mini assistant was super funny.
I loved how sassy she got.
She's super sassy.
We got off topic. You guys, we're getting a little off topic here.
Well, we were talking about New Zealand, I think.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and she's like, "All right, mates, time to get back on topic."
Yeah,
she was so funny. She was so excited. She's like, "Am I going to be on? Am I going to be on?" And we're like, "Yeah, we'll find somewhere to tie you in." And then afterwards, she's like, "How'd I do? Did I do okay?" And I brought her in to do the editing, right? And when I was editing it up and played her some of her thing, and she's like, do I really sound like that? That's not me, is it? Yep. We're just all not used to hearing our own voice outside of our head.
Right. Yeah, I sound a lot better inside my head.
Oh, me too. Yeah. I'm way more Barry Manilow.
Yeah. Inside your head?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, it's awesome.
Nice.
But if you haven't listened to that, go listen to it. You know, we talked about off-roading and camping with children and some tips and tricks. Since I have a 10-year-old, she doesn't go off-roading that often, and Tyler has a baby coming, and we got some good tips and tricks. But I did think we didn't realize it, but the topic was way too broad.
It was very broad.
We should have narrowed it down. And the assistant had a good idea of revisiting this in a year, because you will have a baby at that point, and we'll see how many tips and tricks that you've implemented and what new ones you have learned.
So ours, just on kind of that topic of revisiting in a year, Google and our phones are always listening to us,
sure,
right?
They are. Yeah.
Literally the next morning after we recorded that, I started getting pop-up ads on my Instagram for outdoor microscopes for kids.
Yes, that's right. You sent me one.
What? I was like, I want this for myself.
Right. Yeah. Too cool. Funny.
And I was like, I should get one, but I was like, the kid's not going to use it for like 4 years.
Right. So you're going to lose it in that amount of time.
That time. Yeah.
That, or you're going to use it the whole time.
Exactly.
One or the other.
Yeah.
You're like, look at these snowflakes.
I know, right? I did not start getting any spray bottle pop-ups though. So I was a little disappointed there. Yeah.
Well, you might be getting some for Christmas. We'll see. Oh,
okay. I'll send the secretary around. Go spray that rock over there.
Yeah. Clean all the rocks in front of Kermit's tires before I climb up them, please.
Oh my God. Isn't that what they do on Jeepers Jamboree?
Pretty much.
That's what the rock rollers are there for.
They put rocks in the way to make it easier.
Yeah, but they clean them too while they're doing it.
Yeah, Jeepers don't like their undercarriage getting dirty.
Exactly, or their tires. Yeah. They have a tire washing station once you get to the springs.
Yeah.
So
right on the lawn.
Yep, it is. Yeah, they get you out on the lawn.
Right where the tire shine is.
Oh, Jeeps. You guys make me cry sometimes.
You guys are cute.
You guys are cute. Anyways, so shall we get over to our main topic today?
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. I got nothing to say, so let's just get over. We can hear from Brian. Are we still hearing from Brian?
We are.
Cool.
Definitely.
Sweet. Then here's a little something from Brian, who's newlywed. Congratulations. That happened back in October, I believe. So we'll hear from Brian, and we'll be right back with today's campfire discussion on Thursday.
Are you looking for superior suspension for your Toyota off-road vehicle? At 4-Wheel Underground, we take every effort to engineer tight tolerances and proper material thicknesses in order to achieve a durable suspension with bitchin' fitment. Check out our quality kits with USA manufacturing at 4wheelunderground.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Get it? Because that's two different things.
It is. Yeah.
Yep. We're back today. We're going to be talking about some air systems stuff, and I'm not sure how to tackle this topic.
I know. Yeah. See, you are so entrenched.
I could go in a lot of different directions with this. So I'm not sure if what do people want to know about air systems? I guess we should have asked people to write in and ask questions about air systems.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'm not sure which way I want to go with this.
I think we should start with traditionally what was the way for people to air up, and why was it so difficult, and why
should you air up and down? Or
let's start there. That's actually, let's just go even farther back than how.
More basic.
Yeah, more basic. Let's go with what's the purpose.
Yeah. So for everybody out there who doesn't know, if you have not been listening to the podcast, I own Morphlate, which is kind of morphing. It started as a 4-tire inflation-deflation devices, right? And we're sort of morphing into off-road air management stuff.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And so I've been doing this, and for some reason, it's always fascinated me, air systems and pneumatics, using air to do work kind of thing. And so, and I really enjoy off-roading, and I've never really had great suspension vehicles for off-roading. I've had good suspension vehicles, but I've never had something that, you can 1000% rely on the suspension for all your traction rather than using your tires for traction.
Sure. Okay.
And so I've always been a huge fan of playing around with tire pressures while off-roading, because you get a lot of benefits from playing around with tire pressures, and you can achieve and accomplish a lot of different things by running different air pressures in your tires. And it's all free. It's the number one thing you can do that is the most bang for your buck to improve your off-roading performance, or your vehicle performance. And it doesn't cost you anything.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, play around. And I grew up very poor. And so I never had a lot of expendable money to get a nice suspension system or get, nice things that help your vehicles perform better. I've never been able to spend my money on that. So I always had to play around with tire pressures in order to achieve off-road performance. Right.
Okay.
So, there's a bunch of different things that playing with your tire pressures can do. One is traction, probably our number one thing, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
As you decrease the pressure in your tires, it allows your tire contact patch with the ground to increase. And as you increase that surface area of that contact patch with the ground, you exponentially increase the amount of traction you have on the ground, right? The amount of friction you have with the surface that you're wheeling on to move your vehicle forwards. So number one reason to air down is to increase your contact patch. And by doing that, you increase traction. Another really cool thing, that decreasing your air pressure and increasing your contact patch does is it decreases your ground pressure.
Meaning how much the vehicle is pressing down. What do you mean by that?
It means how much. So ground pressure is like a pressure
measured, point.
Yeah.
Got it.
Pressure is measured in pounds per square inch, PSI typically. That's how Americans do it. There's also bar, kilopascals, etc. But we're going to be talking everything in PSI today. So pounds per square inch. So your ground pressure is calculated as to how much your vehicle weighs, minus, or I guess how much your vehicle weight is divided by your square inch of your contact with the ground, square inches of contact with the ground. So pounds per square inch.
Right. Okay. So when you're aired up, you have a small contact patch.
Yes.
But if your vehicle weighs 5,000 pounds, so you have 5,000 pounds coming down on a small contact patch.
Yes.
But if you're aired down, your contact patch is larger.
Yep.
And you still have 5,000 pounds pressing down, but you're pressing down in a bigger area.
Exactly.
And for most of the vehicles out there, we have 4 tires. And so that's multiplied for or divided by 4 tires.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So you essentially I'm just going to say a tire with a contact patch of let's say 10 square inches to make math easy.
Okay.
Aired up. So at street pressure, you may have a contact patch of 10 square inches. Let's say a 5,000 pound vehicle with 4 tires with a contact patch of 10 square inches. That means your 5,000 pound vehicle divided by 4. So that's what, 1,250.
Yeah.
So 1,250 pounds at each tire, with a 10 square inch contact patch. So each contact patch, your pressure points are seeing about 125 PSI.
Yep.
So that contact on the ground, your ground pressure is 125 pounds
per square inch.
Per tire, per square inch. Yep. Yep. And so if you can increase that contact patch by airing down your tires and now going from, let's say 10 square inches to 50 square inches, which is totally doable, 5Xing your contact patch.
Okay, cool.
You're going to take your 5,000 pounds, divided by 4 and then divided by 50, which gives you 25 PSI.
Wow.
So just by airing down, you've decreased your ground pressure, how much your vehicle weighs on the ground by 125 to 25.
Well, or from 10 to 50.
Yeah.
Same ratio.
Yeah. Yeah. So, airing down changes your ground pressure and it increases your contact patch which increases traction. So, and it's free to do. So air down, everybody. And in my opinion, the biggest thing that we get, the biggest question that I see that people ask is, how much should you air down to? And there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, don't go down past 15. I went down past 15 once and I blew a bead.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you probably have an 8,000 pound vehicle if you're blowing beads at 15 PSI.
Yeah, it really does matter on how much your vehicle weighs to how low of a PSI you can go, how long, of air pressure in your tires you can go. The heavier your vehicle is, if you're down at 15 PSI, you probably are bulging the equivalent of what Bobcat does at 3 PSI.
Exactly. Yep.
Because Bobcat, I don't even know, probably weighs 3,500 pounds, like under half of what a Jeep would weigh.
Yep.
So the vehicle weight does definitely determine how low of a pressure you can run in your tires.
Absolutely. So that's one factor that goes into how you decide what to air down to, your vehicle weight. Another factor is what kind of wheeling you're going to be doing.
Sure.
So the faster you're going, typically the more air pressure you want to have in there. Not necessarily on straightaways. So on straightaways, you can go lower. The big reason why you want to have more air pressure in your tires the faster you're going is for turning.
Okay.
So if you're doing a lot of turning, you typically want to have either higher air pressure or lower profile tires, less sidewall.
Right.
So
okay,
that way
sense.
your sidewall isn't flexing as much and you're getting more control through turns. If you're just doing like quarter miles, like quarter mile track cars run 2 to 3 PSI in their rear tires.
Dang. Okay.
And their drivetrain, their drive tires.
Yeah.
And they can do that. And there's some awesome pictures out there of track cars just folding their tires over on takeoff. They can do that because they're not turning. They're just staying in a straight line. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if you're turning fast a lot, like say a track car or rally sport car, they typically have low profile tires. Because they can run lower pressure and run a bigger contact patch, have more traction on the ground, but less sidewall to maintain control through turning.
Got it.
So there's lots of different things you can do and air down to. For the average off-roader, I would say let's just say an average overlander that's going to be going through forest roads to get to a camping site to stay at and camp at and set up base camp for like a week. You can probably air down a fully loaded overlanding vehicle to 10 PSI and be pretty safe.
Maybe. Some of those vehicles get pretty heavy.
They get pretty heavy, but as long as you're not making fast turns, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
A
35 on a 17-inch wheel aired on a vehicle that weighs 8,000 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to be pooching quite a bit then. But the ride is going to be phenomenal. You're going to have a lot of absorption of the trail, right? So your tire becomes part of your suspension now at that point.
Sure. Which is really one of the major benefits, in my opinion. Granted, you get better contact patch. It makes wheeling a little bit easier, but it also is a more comfortable ride.
100%. Yeah. So it allows you to stay safer because your body isn't getting taxed as much. You're not getting as tired while wheeling.
Right.
So it makes the wheeling more enjoyable, which means you can wheel longer and you're going to wheel more often.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of different factors that goes into it, from vehicle weight, what types of wheeling you want to do, what you're comfortable going down to. The only thing that's going to happen typically, you could catch a sidewall on something. Because your sidewall is going to stick out more. You're pooching your tires more.
Do you have any experience in that recently?
I do. Yeah. But I wasn't really pooched out at all.
Oh,
that's the fun part for me, is that I wasn't really pooched out. It was
just we're shoving it between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. Shoving it between a Jeep and a wall.
Yeah.
So, you're more likely to catch a sidewall. And so you do have that risk to think about, but you put that into your driving calculations, right? The biggest risk that you might do that you may not be able to avoid is blow a bead, right?
Yes.
And everybody, like, for some reason, there's this thought in the off-roading world that popping a bead off your rim is a really, really, really bad thing. It's really not.
It's not.
As long as you catch it and stop.
Right.
Right.
As long as you catch it and stop. And it's not as long as you have the proper equipment to be able to put it back together.
All you need is any air compressor.
Yeah.
And a lift, a jack of some sort, which you should have anyways if you're going off-roading. You need to have an air source.
Right.
And you need to have some way to lift your vehicle up.
Okay.
In my opinion, if you're going off-roading, you need to have those two things.
Yes.
So if you have those two things, you can reseat a bead on a trail. No problem.
Okay.
So
yeah. I've never had to do it actually in my entire,
Yes,
I've had a bead come off, but all I needed, and then the guy behind me had a power tank and we just hooked the power tank up and it was seated in the correct spot and it just blew right up.
Yeah.
That was on Bobcat.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we did it in Moab too. You unseated a bead going through the golden crack.
Did I?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't remember
Either that or you burped the tire completely out.
I burped the tire.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've reseated beads quite a few times on trails for people. So it's not that bad. You just lift up the truck so that you kind of have free space under the tire, or you can put the jack in and dig out underneath the tire. And then you put the air source on your valve stem and you start manipulating and pulling on the tire, and you can hear where the air is coming out of the bead.
Correct.
And so you just kind of pull on the tire, reposition the tire until you get the bead of the tire up close enough to the rim that air doesn't come out. Then you just have to hold it until you have like 3 PSI in the tire. And then it typically holds itself and it'll start seating itself.
Right. And then somewhere along the line, you'll hear a pow and where the bead will seat.
It depends how much volume of air you're putting in.
Okay.
If you're using a power tank, yes.
Yeah.
If you're using a firecracker, yes. If you're using flammables, yes, it will. But if you're using like a 1 CFM Harbor Freight compressor, you probably won't get a POW.
Aw.
It'll just slowly seat itself and you just kind of watch it go into its place.
How anticlimactic.
Yes.
That's sad.
So the big myth is for reseating beads is that it's really hard to do on a trail. It's not, in my opinion. If you have experience doing it, practice at home. The other big myth is that it takes a lot of air volume quickly to reseat a bead, and it doesn't. It makes it easier for sure if you have a lot of air volume quickly. Explosions are a lot of fun to do. It does make it easier to reseat a bead, but it's not necessary. Like I reseat beads all the time with my little, I think it might be a 1.1 CFM compressor in my garage, a little pancake compressor. You can totally do it. The trick is you just have to make sure that you get a seal between the tire and the rim.
Right. And is that, would you typically reseat the beads, or the ones that you do, are they bead lock wheels?
Some are, some aren't.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've had to reseat the inside bead on my wheels twice before.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to reseat the inside bead on Jeff Balkin's truck once. We went out snow wheeling for a recovery, and he blew the inside bead on one of his pit bulls. So we had to reseat that one. I've reseated inside beads on 2 or 3 other vehicles out snow wheeling typically.
Yeah.
And then quite a few that aren't bead locks as well. And you're doing, typically it's the outside beads that'll go first.
So do you normally, when this happens, do you normally see one side de-bead?
Yeah, it's usually not both, because it'll de-bead both if you continue driving on it.
Yeah.
But usually you can tell pretty quickly that you have a flat going on.
Yeah. So. And I think that's when things get a little bit more difficult. Like when both beads are de-beaded and you really have to concentrate on figure out where the air is coming out. That's when more of a boost of air, a sudden gust of air will help seed at least one of the sides, if not both at that point.
It won't, it would do both. I don't think you'd be able to seat one with a burst of air unless you're doing an explosion.
Yeah.
I think an explosion would be the only way to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's different tricks you can do for reseating beads. If you've caught it quick, it's not a lot of debeading or reseating beads that need to happen. Didn't we reseat a bead on the glue tread trip? Wasn't Lee Lim? Didn't Lee?
Yeah, I think he burped a bunch of air out.
Well, that wasn't the glue tread. He wasn't on that trip then.
That was the our listener
the snail trail run.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways, if you catch it quick, you don't have a massive, you typically don't have to do the entire tire. Usually it's like a section of the tire that got debeaded, right? So it's pretty easy to do. If you have the full tire to do, there's some tricks you can do. If you're keeping the tire and the wheel on the vehicle, just make sure that there's clear space underneath the tire so it's hanging, so you have equal pressure around, and you can grab 2 or 3 people to just pull the tire towards the bead that needs to be seated.
Right.
And that's usually enough to get it seated enough to start building pressure inside the tire, right?
Got it. Okay.
The goal is that you need to create it so that you have less air escaping than you have going in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's if you can accomplish that, then that's the goal, right?
Okay.
So anyways, lots of easy ways to do it. So in my opinion, everybody's like, I don't want to debead a tire on the trail. And I'm like, it's easy to do. It's easy to put a bead back on typically. Right. So go down as low pressure as you can until you start blowing beads off tires.
And then go up a little.
And then go up 2 PSI.
Yeah.
And that's kind of your magic spot for that type of wheeling that you're doing that day. And your loadouts in your vehicle are going to be different. So the 4Runner weighs significantly less during wintertime than it does during summertime.
Really?
Because during summertime, I'm usually going on 3-day trips.
Okay. Yeah.
And wintertime, I'm usually going on a day trip, snow wheeling.
Right.
So I've got 500-600 less pounds in the vehicle. Your loadouts are going to be different from trip to trip as well, depending on the trip you're doing. So your weight is going to be different. The type of wheeling you're going to be doing is going to be different, whether you're snow wheeling, mud wheeling, rock crawling, going fast through fire roads or out in the desert somewhere. So the pressure that you need to go down to and air down to is going to be different for all these different situations and different between you and your buddy. So go down, keep going as low pressure as you can, because you only get benefits from going lower pressure. There's very, very few drawbacks, if any. Like the biggest drawback is you're more likely to catch a sidewall and you're more likely to blow a bead.
Right.
But blowing a bead is not a big issue. Carry some glue tread for the sidewall. Once you blow a bead, you found where your pressure is and go back up 2 PSI.
There could also be a factor of airing down so much and driving quicker that you're going to damage the rim.
Totally. If you're, and that's like Ultra 4 cars, right?
Yeah.
They don't go low pressure, A, because it takes too much time to air up and down at pit stops. But B, if they went driving at 20 miles an hour through a sledgehammer, they're going to destroy their rims.
Yeah, at like 10 PSI.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to get pinch flats or they're going to destroy a rim. So there is a level to that but the thing is, most of the time, us as off-roaders, we're not going fast.
No.
At least you and I.
Not rock crawling.
Yeah, not rock crawling, and to some extent, not overlanding. Overlanders, I mean, they have fun on fire roads and stuff, but they're not bombing through areas that are rocky.
Yep.
But there is something to think about that, if you're going fast and you're coming up on rocks and you're at a very low pressure, you don't want to hurt the tire or the rim. So, take a precautionary stance there.
And that goes back to the faster you're going, the more pressure you want in your tires.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. All right. I like it. So what other restrictions around airing down would you think that would have on the vehicle? We've already kind of discussed the weight of the vehicle, the sidewall height versus turning, and the type of wheeling that you're doing. Is there anything else that comes to mind to consider for why you would air down a vehicle? Or consider your airing down pressure?
Your pressures. No, I always tell people just keep going as low as you can until you start blowing beads. So go on a trip where you start off 2 PSI lower than your last trip. And if you don't blow a bead, go another 2 PSI lower.
The next time.
Yeah. You don't blow a bead, go another 2 PSI lower the next time.
Okay.
And just keep doing it. It's going to take multiple trips to figure it out. And then once you blow a bead, go back up 2 PSI to what you were on your previous trip.
Right.
So that's what I tell people to do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So now that people are aired down, you're airing down for the pressure that you're desired and for the wheeling that you enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, I would really only air down if I knew there was a gas station nearby where I'd be able to air back up.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a whole lot of options or I didn't spend the money for some of the options that were out there. Mm-hmm. But it was really like, there was ARBs and back then when I was doing this, it was pretty much only the single ARB.
Yeah.
And there was some Viairs.
Yep.
And they weren't fast.
No,
gas stations were definitely faster because they usually had a big tank somewhere.
Yep.
But I did have larger tires, so it did take a little bit of time. But so why was the single ARB or the Viairs, why are they so slow? Like why did it take so long for these compressors that got onto the market early? Why did it take so long for them to air tires up?
Mainly, so compressors, there's 2 different types of compressors and I guess 2 ends of the spectrum. And then you can build a compressor according to that spectrum and how that range works, right? So you've got high volume, low pressure.
Okay.
And that would be something like an air mattress.
Sure.
Compressor fan, right? Yeah. It's more like a fan. It has a fan moving and it really can't get above like 2 PSI.
Yeah. So it's filling a lot of space.
It's moving a lot of air very quickly, but it can't compress the air to create pressure, right?
Okay.
So high volume, low pressure is on one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is the opposite of that. So high pressure, low volume. And so typically the higher the pressure that a compressor can create, the lower volume it's going to put out because it has to take an incoming amount of air and compress it and get it to keep going, right? As a compressed pressure. So when compressors first started coming out on the market, and especially Viair is an incredibly smart compressor company. They found out early on that there's a restriction in how much airflow you can put into a tire on a vehicle.
Oh yeah.
And that restriction ends up at your Schrader valve, your tire valve stem.
Sure. It's the smallest point.
It's the bottleneck of an air system. Yeah.
It's a good way to say it.
And so they realized that. I don't know if ARB realized that, but ARB built their single cylinder compressors for that restriction. If you look at their airflow of those compressors, they don't really exceed 2 to 2.5 CFM.
Okay. And what does a Schrader valve accept?
A Schrader valve is technically the core. That's the name of the valve core that's inside your tire valve stem.
Okay.
Yeah. So that valve core is called a Schrader valve. And so with that valve core in place, it can really only accept about 2 CFM, 2 to 2.5 CFM, depending on how much pressure you're pushing with.
Sure. Okay.
Now that changes if you're pushing with a lot of pressure, like a power tank, where you've got 200, 300, 400 PSI of pushing force behind your airflow, you can push more air through. But you're still, with 300, 400 PSI behind it, you're still only looking at like 4 to 5 CFM of airflow.
Wow. Okay.
Into a Schrader valve. And so
does that hurt the valve or is it just pinned open?
It's just pinned open. Yeah. It has a spring in the Schrader valve. So it'll depress inwards and then it has a limiting point at which it can't depress anymore.
Right.
So it'll just let in. The big thing with CO2, specifically if you're pressurizing an air system with CO2, is that if you dump a lot of CO2 at once, it becomes liquid.
Yes.
So if you go too quickly with CO2, you'll dump liquid CO2 in, or nitrogen, same thing, liquid nitrogen, right? And if you try and put too much of that into an orifice, a pass-through area, it'll freeze up that orifice.
So then you take it off and it lets air out?
It'll be frozen, kind of open. It'll either freeze the spring open or it'll freeze the orifice. So you take it off and the valve will be open, but it's frozen, closed. Does that make sense? It's like the liquid CO2 froze in and created an ice cube in the valve.
Yeah.
And so it won't let air out necessarily, but it might be open still. And
It'll thaw.
It'll thaw out. And if you let dirt in there while it's thawing out, then you've got a big issue. Now you've got a compromised Schrader valve.
You got a dirty valve.
Yep. Yeah, you do. Your restriction is your tire valve stem.
Yeah. Okay.
So doing one tire at a time, airing up the way we've always done it traditionally in off-roading, right? In the off-road world. If you have a compressor that pushes more airflow than that, you're just creating a backlog of pressure and working pressure on the compressor and cylinders of the compressor.
Okay. So if you have something that's like 3 CFM and you're trying to push it through something that is only accepts 2.5 CFM, unless you have an immense amount of pressure, then there's a half of a CFM of backlog
building up
that can't get into that tire. And eventually that backlog is back pressure is really, I guess, what it is. It's a back pressure that is making your compressor work harder and harder and harder because now you have pressure being pushed back into the compressor.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, Vayre is, in my opinion, one of the best compressor manufacturers in the world because they don't overload their compressors. They don't build their compressors for more than a tire can accept. So their compressors last forever because...
Yeah, I was going to say their compressors are like, they have great warranties and they will last a really, really long time.
Yes, they have probably one of the highest quality compressors in the world for portable 12-volt compressors, right, for vehicles. Yeah. And that's mainly because they're not overloading their compressors.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So ARB, the single-cylinder ARBs, typically last a very long time too.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting overloaded. Now, what we've seen in the past few years, I would 7-8 years maybe, when Smittybilt launched their compressors and then ARB launched their twin ARB compressors, you have these now higher output compressors that are only lasting like 1 to 2 years. And it's very typical now to see twin ARBs blowing motors, burning up motors or blowing gaskets or seals in them. Yeah. And same thing with the Smittybilt compressors is they're not really blowing motors. They're more just burning up seals and gaskets in them.
Okay.
So they're not building as much air pressure now. You can't build 150 PSI with them or they stop flowing as much. You're not getting that, 5.5 CFM out of them anymore after a year or two. So the reason that that's happening is because they're pushing more airflow than a tire can accept, which creates that backlog of pressure on the compressor, which makes the compressor work a lot harder during its life. So it may not blow on you right away,
sure,
but over time, if it's trying to fill up a 30 PSI tire and fill up something to 30 PSI, but it's always working at 60 to 70 PSI, it's just always going to run hotter and work harder to do that. So it just burns up the lifespan of the compressor because you're not letting the compressor work efficiently.
So that Smittybilt is like 5.5. Yeah, 5.5 CFM. What was the dual ARB?
6.2.
6.2.
Yep.
And so now you have a 5.5 and a 6.2 that's pressing into a Schrader valve that only accepts 2.5.
They'll say 2 to make math easy. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do any math, but
we will be later.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so now you have a big backlog going,
you're creating a bigger back pressure,
and that's what's really damaging these compressors.
Yes. So you can see it happening anytime you have a compressor with an inline gauge, right?
You can see it or hear it because I think I can hear them
both.
Too. Yeah,
totally. You can hear both. So when you have an inline gauge and you're airing up a tire and the gauge reads higher than what's in the tire,
or what can be outputted by the compressor.
Not necessarily. Yeah. Or if your gauge is reading higher than what the compressor is rated for.
Yeah.
That means that you're creating a backlog in that line between your tire and your compressor.
Right.
So anytime there's tons of people out there that are like, yeah, I have to shut off my compressor to check the pressure in my tire because the gauge reads higher while it's on, while the compressor's on. I'm like, that's that backlog of pressure happening.
Right. Okay.
So, you're getting a good efficiency out of your compressor when that inline gauge reads within 2 to 3 PSI of what's in the tire. So that means you have a good flow equalization, right?
Oh, got it.
Your compressor is able to not overwork itself.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's a good way to tell if your compressor is overworking itself or not. If the gauge reads more than 5 PSI higher while the compressor's on, then the compressor, you're just putting more stress on the life of the compressor. So with all of that, let's see. So yes, to answer your original question of it takes so long to do with those little compressors because they're limited on how much air they can put into a tire.
Right. So what was the benefit? Like I know back in the day when we only had, a single ARB or a Viair, a lot of people ran air tanks.
Absolutely.
Right. Because you have a stored volume of air.
Yep.
And more pressure, I would assume, right? Could you bring those up a little higher? But was it really the benefit is just a stored air? So like when you go to air up a tire, you're just I have 30 pounds of pressure inside this air tank so that I'll be able to air up this tire a little quicker. But once that's done, now I'm back to
you're still using the 1 CFM.
I'm still using my tiny compressor to air up the rest of the tires.
Yes. So air tanks are there's a lot of misinformation out there with air tanks. I think there's a lot of off-roaders that think having an air tank is awesome and it's going to fix all your problems with an air system. Not the case.
Okay.
Having an air reserve to run air lockers is a necessity.
Yes.
But you don't need a lot of air to actuate a solenoid.
No, not at all.
All it needs is you can achieve air locker air from the size of a soda can.
Oh yeah.
Like that's all you need.
Less than that.
I
mean, what don't they sell like little 20-pound like bottles and it goes for like years?
Yeah, but those are usually at like 3,000 PSI. So your volume of air,
I think aren't they just CO2?
It could be whatever your air, whatever it is. It could be CO2, it could be nitrogen, could be oxygen.
Yeah.
Could be whatever. But usually those little bottles like that are pressurized at like 3,000 PSI.
Really?
Yeah.
Like a paintball gun bottle? That's like 3,000
PSI.
PSI?
Yep.
Oh.
So
that's a lot.
It's a lot. And it's a lot of air compact into this tiny little package, right? And so when you have 3,000 PSI in I don't know how big, let's say a 1 cubic foot volume.
Yeah.
Then you've got quite a bit of usable air depending on what you're actuating with that air with. So let's talk about air tanks on vehicles.
Yeah.
Because the numbers are a little smaller and easier to deal with.
Yeah, okay.
Let's say a 1 gallon air tank, which is pretty common for off-roading vehicles. People are like, hey, I turned my bumper into an air tank, or I turned my roll cage into an air tank.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool. Out of a bumper, you're probably getting a gallon, maybe a gallon and a half of storage of volume space.
Sure. Okay.
Out of a roll cage, I would maybe 2 gallons if you have a lot of roll cage, but like there's not a lot of volume inside DOM tubing on roll cages.
Right. Yeah.
So your volume space is pretty small. Congratulations. You did something cool that you can brag about, but your functionality of it is not great. And here's why. 1 gallon of air, pressurized at 150 PSI, because that's kind of the standard tank pressures.
Sure. Okay.
That people like to pressure stuff to. At 150 PSI, 1 gallon of volume. Let's say a 35-inch tire with 17-inch rims and 1250 wide. So if you want to figure out the volume of that tire, I did the calculation once. It's something like 30, 35 gallons. 28 to 35 gallons, somewhere in there. So your 1 gallon of air in your tank pressurized at 150 PSI is going to take, let's say 30 gallons to 3 PSI. No, that'd be 90. Yeah, it's 90 PSI. So it'd be 5 PSI.
Okay.
Right? Is that, I don't know.
I don't know how to do that. I pulled the calculator out, but I don't know how to do that math.
So take 150 divided by 30. I think it's 5.
That's 5.
Okay. So you're going to take 1 gallon air tank at 150 PSI, and it's going to fill up one 35-inch tire, 5 PSI.
Right. Okay.
Roughly. Those are rough numbers, right? Don't quote me on that actual math, but that gives you an idea.
Yeah. So your 1 gallon at a really high PSI does not fill a tire up very much.
Not at all. And if you're talking about 4 tires, you're at 1.25 PSI in all 4 tires for that 1 gallon of air tank.
Yeah. I've always thought the benefit of an air tank would be to beat a tire. Like that would be its primary purpose.
It totally can. Yeah. And that goes a long way. That's why tire shops have those tire buster tanks, right? Mm-hmm. So they have a 5 gallon air tank that they pressurize, and you always see the new guy having to use it in a bucket of water because he doesn't understand how it works and what's going to happen, puts in the bucket of water and blows it up on himself.
Yes.
So anyways, those are called tire busters. There's lots of different names for them. But that's what they're designed for. You pressurize them to 150 PSI. It's 5 gallon of air
and boom,
and shoots into, releases all the air all at once into a tire and reseats the bead.
Yep.
So that's really all running an air tank is good for, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because there's such low volume of storage space there. That's not going to do anything functional and usable for us as off-roaders.
Right.
You may be able to run air tools, but you still, if you're running like a die grinder of some sort with the air tools, you're going to blow through that 1 gallon in like 5 seconds.
Sure. Yeah.
And then after that, it's only whatever your compressor puts out. Just because you have a 1 gallon tank that can be pressurized to 150 PSI does not mean you're always getting 150 PSI out of your air system.
Yeah.
It means that until you use up that 1 gallon, you get 150 PSI. Well,
correct. It'll
lower. It'll lower the PSI as you're using it.
Yeah.
But like you're not, a 1 gallon does not get you a lot of air reserve.
No.
Especially on 35 or bigger tires. Right.
Right. And now I think with how far battery technology has come, air tools are a thing of the past.
I
think there's still maybe a place for them in mechanic shops or
in shops
and garages, but not out on the trail.
No,
I mean, it's, like we're saying, the air tanks are not big enough to hold enough pressure of air to run the tool for long enough. And battery technology is so great nowadays that you can do almost everything you want with a power tool.
Yep. 100%. So
air tanks, a thing of the past out on the trail.
I think so. I don't think they're usable anymore. In order to make a usable air tank, in my opinion, you really got to have like 7 to 10 gallons available. And that's just too big to put on a vehicle. Like who's going to put a 7 to 10 gallon thing on their vehicle of reserved air when you could use that space for other stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I used to run a 5 gallon air tank, and
I was going to bring this up, by the way.
Yeah, I used to run a 5 gallon air tank on the first gen 4Runner, and pressurized at 120 PSI, I can get about 7 PSI of air blasted into all 4 tires. So It was about 5 to 7 PSI I could rely on. And then after that, it's just whatever the compressor puts out. You're limited to whatever compressor you're using.
Sure.
So,
okay.
In order to, in my opinion, really make it worthwhile, you got to have 7 to 10 gallons. That might get you around 10 PSI on a 36-inch tires doing all 4. It's like that 10 gallons will air up a 36-inch tire, I think, just fine at 150 PSI, but you're still going to be relying on the compressor for the other 3 tires.
Right. So let's move forward on compressors.
Yeah.
So now, we've been talking about sort of these smaller, older style compressors. I mean, Vire's still around, still very much in the market.
Yep.
Not a lot of people are looking at the single ARB.
No.
Right. Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the dual ARB and the Smittybilt, which was sort of the first kind of, I don't know what you would upright.
So we can call them a 60 millimeter compressor.
60 millimeter.
That's the size of the cylinder.
The cylinder on the inside.
Yep.
Okay. And then we now come into, I would say, more modern times, because it wasn't long ago that the dual ARB came out, or it wasn't long ago that Smittybilt was, It's
been about 6 years on the dual ARB and about 7 to 8 years on the Smittybilt.
Really?
That's 60 millimeter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just maybe behind on my times on compressors or something like that. But now we come into this era of dual ARBs and dual 60 millimeters and just being able to really get some pressure out there.
Get a lot airflow. There.
Yeah.
We've always been able to do pressure.
Okay.
Pressure has always been doable. I mean, Vaer makes some 250 PSI compressors to run air suspension stuff on.
Wow. Okay.
So air suspensions don't require a lot of volume, right? They're just airbags that are really low volume. So they can take a 2 to 3 gallon air tank, pressurize it to 250 PSI and be able to do whatever you want with airbags on a vehicle.
Right. Actually, can we go to Vaer just for a second? Because I don't know what it is. And there's probably some other listeners that are a little confused in a way about that.
Okay.
There's a ton of different versions of Vaers, but let's talk about some of the more relevant ones. Like
kind of the popular ones.
Yeah. Isn't there a 400, a 450, a 600?
I don't know about a 600. The 600 might be as you're getting into their like constant duty cycle compressors that are low volume, high pressure stuff.
Got it.
Their two big popular compressors in the off-road world are the 88 and the 400.
Okay. Yeah.
The 88 is
like what? Yeah. What are the differences, or when would an advantage be to either of those?
So the 88 is a 1.1, 1.2 CFM, really small form factor compressor. It pulls very little power. So you can, I believe, actually run that one off your cigarette lighter if you wanted to. I'm pretty sure it comes with battery clips though.
Okay.
The alligator battery clips. But it's a low volume compressor. It's cheap. It's like $70-$80. Very, very similar to the little 1.2 CFM compressor you can find at Harbor Freight. It might actually be the same one.
Okay.
I haven't gotten the Harbor Freight one to like dissect them and look and see if it actually is the same compressor.
Well, Christmas is coming.
But they're very similar compressors, right? So that's the 88P, really low volume. It's something that is a budget. You just need something to get you aired back up when you come off the trail.
Sure.
So that's what that one's good for. The 400 is double that output from one single cylinder.
Oh,
so it's about 1.8 to 2 CFM.
Got it.
On the 400P. And then there's I think the 450 is like a 2.5 CFM. So you get one more half of a CFM from the 400 that Vaer has. And your price points are the 88P is $70-$80. The 400P is $220, $230, right around there.
Okay.
And then that 450 is, I want to say 250, 260, somewhere in that range.
So the 450 is 2-ish CFM,
2.5
for almost for $250.
Yep.
And how much is a PSI Pro?
PSI Pro is 325,
which is a little bit more interesting. That's nice.
Our regular 10.6 is $230 though.
Wow.
Yep. And our regular 5.6 is $160.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's nice. Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying. I never dug into it. Right. Yeah. I never knew what the differences of those were. So 88, the Vaer 88 is just a lower CFM.
Yep.
And the 450 is there like more. Yep. More streamlined for off-roaders.
Yeah. So the big thing to think about with compressors, and just to help make it simpler to consider, is that almost every 12 volt portable compressor, which is what we're looking at in the off-road space, can do 150 PSI.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much all of them are standardized at 150 PSI. So let's not worry about pressure, not talk about pressure. Let's talk about air volume and how much air those compressors can push. That's your CFM, your cubic feet per minute.
Okay. So I don't need to necessarily concern myself with looking at a different style compressor if I'm airing up like Clifford's tires, my F250 using for towing that goes to like 80 PSI. All of them should be able to do it.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's just amount of time.
It's just how much time it'll take to do it, and that's your volume, your airflow.
Airflow. Yep. Cool. Okay. Yep. Thank you for clarifying that. Yep. Let's move to modern day, I guess. Let's talk about the new stuff that's kind of coming out. Duals, dual ARBs, the dual 60 millimeters, and then let's maybe close with the PSI Pro kind of coolness stuff that's there.
Yeah. So, because it's not really, in my opinion, worth it to run air tanks They take up too much space. In order to make a functional air tank that you can actually use for off-roading, it's going to take up too much space. I would much rather use that space to take, a mat of AstroTurf to put outside my tent. So I have a place to put my shoes and walk in and out of my tent to keep my tent clean.
Or actually put your spare tire back in there.
Yeah, put a spare tire maybe.
The right size, yeah.
So really it comes down to, if you're not using an air tank, then we can start focusing more on just using a compressor. The problem with that has been, as we've started making higher output compressors and higher airflow compressors, you end up with compressors not lasting as long because you have the issue of that backlog of pressure, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I considered when making the first 4-tire kits for commercially available, there's been DIY 4-tire kits. People have been making them on their own for a very long time. Early 90s, I think, is as far back as I can remember that I've found in my research, but nobody's commercialized it and nobody's used good parts, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Everybody uses like a rubber PVC hose, which holds memory. So if you keep it coiled up in your rig, it won't lay down flat when you want to lay it out and air up your vehicle or air down or use it. And B, it gets frozen stiff in cold temperatures, cold weather.
Got it.
And it deteriorates in UV light.
Yeah. So it's all negative.
It's all bad. Rubber PVC. Please don't make 4-tire hose kits out of rubber PVC. It's embarrassing. It just shows that you don't understand what you're doing and the parts you're using to engineer stuff and make stuff out of. So, rubber PVC hose is what people have always used for them. They've used terrible air chucks that rip up your valve stem threads. They used hose clamps, which poke you and cut you and stab you. There's been a lot of bad analog gauges that operate off of springs that go bad over time.
Yeah.
And another thing about analog gauges that a lot of people don't realize is that they only read accurate in the middle of their range.
Right.
So if you have a 0 to 100 PSI analog gauge on your air system, it's only reading accurately at 50 PSI. Which off-roader airs up their tires to 50 PSI?
Airs down to 50 PSI.
Or airs down maybe? I mean, like, yeah. So,
I mean, because for me, I had 2 gauges.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I had a very high end, like oil filled gauge or water filled. I don't even know.
Usually oil filled, liquid of some kind.
Liquid, yeah,
gauge. Some sort of oil.
That went from 0 to 20 PSI.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. Because I'm airing down to 15. At that time, I was airing down to like 15. Now I'm airing down to 5.
Yeah.
Right. But I was airing down to 10 to 15 and a 0 to 20 gauge, 10 is when it's the most accurate.
Yeah.
So if I was airing down to 10 to 15, I was like, I'm still in its range.
Yeah.
But then I had another gauge to air up. And, and that one was probably a 0 to 100.
0 to 100. Usually 0 to 60 works really well
maybe
for
0
off-road,
to 60
so
would be
30
fine.
is your middle. Yeah.
But I think mine was 0 to 100, but I was still only airing up to like 30. But I couldn't use the 0 to 20 because I damaged it. So I had to have another gauge.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, fun tip, gauges can usually handle about 50% more than their range before you damage them.
Oh, okay.
So if you have 0 to 20, it can handle up to about 30 before you damage the gauge. 0 to 100 can handle about 150 PSI before you damage it.
But you just won't see it.
You just won't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be pinged. If it's a 0 to 20, it'll be pinged at 20.
Yep.
So then I could have just done that. If it was pinged at 20, I'll probably be fine.
Yeah. So, so gauges, analog gauges, that's what you have to do though. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you need to run 2 gauges if you want accurate tire pressures.
Right.
One for airing down and one for airing up. But a lot of people don't do that.
Nope.
They try and run everything on an analog gauge that's typically 0 to 100 or 0 to 150. And it'll only be accurate in the center of the gauge, and it's about 10 to 15% off at the ends of its range.
Wow.
So, the bigger your range, the more off you are when you're airing down or airing up.
Right. Well, okay. So then digital gauges are more accurate.
Digital gauges are amazing because they use a term that you've used on the podcast before.
I have.
Piezoelectronic. I can't remember the name of the term.
I don't know it either.
Piezo. It's essentially a crystal.
Oh,
that crystals, as they get deformed, they emit electricity charge.
It's like how records work, right?
Yeah. Piezoelectricity. I think that's what it's called. And so a lot of digital gauges run on piezoelectricity. And so they can sense minute, minimal amounts of change. And through the magic of electricity can figure out what that means in terms of that change, whether it's pounds per square inch or whether it's using to measure something else in digital gauge.
Okay.
So digital gauges are far more accurate and far more precise, and they maintain that accuracy across their the range of their scale. So like our gauges at Morphlate, they're a 1 to 150 PSI gauge, and they typically will maintain that accuracy across their entire scale. That's not just accurate in the center of the scale.
Yes.
So that's the beauty of digital gauges, the accuracy and precision you get from them. The downside to digital gauges is that they require batteries. You need to have a source of electricity, right? And so our gauges last about 2 to 3 years before you need to swap out the batteries, as long as you're releasing the air pressure from your hoses before you coil them up and store it. So, but anyways, to gauges, analog gauges they're bad. They're terrible unless you're getting like a $200 analog gauge. But then at that point, it's like, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
Is it really worth the bang for the buck there for your average consumer to get a $200 analog gauge?
Well, yeah, you're getting a super expensive gauge, and you could just get a digital one that's accurate across the board for much cheaper.
Yep.
And then you could save that $180 and go buy yourself a 33 or something.
Go buy yourself a Morphlate hose kit. So anyways, where were we? Talking about single tires. Airing up and kind of the new technology in compressors, right?
Yeah,
we got sidetracked on gauges.
Yeah.
Compressors are awesome. They compress air. They create an air source for you out of nothing. That takes the air around you and compresses it to create airflow and pressure.
Right. We were actually, you were discussing how bad Morphlate hoses or Morphlate or four tire kits
are, and we got into gauges
back in the 90s because people were putting stupid analog gauges on there, PVC rubber hoses and hose clamps and bad
chocks and everything. All the parts are bad. So anyways, because I realized that I mainly started making 4-tire hose kits because I'm lazy. Mm-hmm. There's a very fine line between lazy and efficient, and I never realized which side of that line I'm on. But I didn't want to squat at tires anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so by having to just bend over, hook an air chuck onto a tire, do that 4 times, and then be able to manage all 4 tires standing up at a bumper or a hood or a tailgate, that's what I really wanted. And I realized very quickly that by doing that, my compressor ran a lot better. And to your point, where you said earlier, you can hear the difference in the compressor by running 4 tires at a time versus 1 tire. Yeah. Totally true. That's what I started noticing almost immediately. I was like, my compressor sounds a lot different. It sounds like it's running better.
Yeah. It sounds like you can even hear it just inflating a tire, right? Mm-hmm. When you start inflating a tire that's down at 0 or 510 PSI. The sound of that compressor is audibly different than when it's at the point of 30, 60 or 80 PSI. Yep. Right. And the point at which it starts changing to become struggling and louder and working happens so different when once you start, connecting multiple tires.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Totally. So, once I realized something was going on, I was like, what's going on? Why is it working so much better now? And it was working faster. And it wasn't just like, it would take 3 minutes, 2.5 to 3 minutes to air up a single tire with a twin ARB. And then, so you multiply that times 4.
Sure.
So you would think it should take 14 minutes to air up 4 tires. And that's not including any time to go around to all 4 tires, right? Yeah. Doing 1 tire at a time. So you would think hooking up 4 tires at once, it would take 14 minutes of runtime.
In theory, yeah.
In theory. It didn't, though. It took 8 or 9 minutes. And I'm like, something else is going on. We're using more airflow now. And then I figured out that Schrader valves have this really high restriction. So a Schrader valve is only about 1/16 of an inch orifice.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I figured out that measurement on what that orifice is. I figured out what is the cubic feet per minute that can go through an orifice that size, which is only about 2 at the pressures that we're working at. So around 15 PSI, right, is about 2 CFM. And I was like, interesting. Well, the 20RB puts out 3 times as much of that air. So it's really just creating a backlog of pressure on it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's totally happening. When you check the gauge, you have to shut off the ARB in order to check the pressure in the tire, in order to get the accurate pressure in the tire. It's like there's a backlog of pressure here. But if we hook up all 4 tires at once, we're now have an equalized pressure. The gauge is reading within 2-3 PSI of what's actually in the tires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so we're now using the full airflow capacity of a twin ARB. But I also realized that the air capacity of the air system is more than what a twin ARB can put out.
Yes.
So
a twin ARB, and if a Schrader valve is roughly 2, mm-hmm. a twin ARB is really only made for like 2 tires.
2 to 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 3 would be perfect.
3 would be perfect, right? So, but we're looking at 2 to 3 tires, and a twin ARB will run efficiently. Mm-hmm. So I'm like,
who's going to make a 3-tire hose kit?
Yeah, right. So let's make I was like, we have more usable airflow capacity, so we can make higher output compressors now.
Yeah.
So I went to and found and did this deep dive search on factories and factories overseas and figuring out where everybody was making their compressors. And I found out that all the compressors in the world are pretty much made at like 3 different factories.
That sounds familiar.
Yes.
That sounds like a wheel every weekend search on rooftop tents.
Totally. There's like, I think 2 to 4 factories, maybe 5 that makes all the rooftop tents in the world, something like that.
Back then, I think it was 3.
Yeah. So anyways, it's amazing once you start looking into production and getting into production side of manufacturing and factories, how few factories there are in this world.
Oh, wow.
Like tennis rackets. Here's a good one. Every single tennis brand out there, they're all made at one factory.
Serious?
Tennis rackets. Yep.
Wow. Somebody needs to start another factory.
Yeah. Right. Because during COVID, we couldn't pump them out fast enough because people could only go outside and play during COVID. So tennis exploded during COVID as well. And we couldn't make tennis rackets fast enough for the demand. And so I was like, if somebody wants to make $1 billion right now, open a tennis racket factory.
Yeah. During
COVID. Yeah. I think it's back down to manageable now. But anyways, where was I talking about? Oh, compressors and factories. So I reached out to a bunch of different factories and was like, I want a compressor that does 10 to 12 CFM. What do you have as a baseline thing?
Sure.
There was only one factory that had something there already. Mm-hmm. And I was like, awesome. What is, how long have you had this? How long have you done stress testing on it? How does it work out? And originally I didn't know a whole lot about compressors. I just knew that I wanted something with a good CFM.
Okay.
But I didn't know what made a compressor good quality.
Yeah.
And so I was just looking to white label something and trust that the factory had done its work on quality testing and stress testing and all that. So that was our very first 10.6 dual 60 millimeter piston compressor.
Okay. Yeah.
We launched that about the same time that Napa launched the MaxiTrack compressor.
Right. Yeah.
I honestly don't know who was first to market with that compressor.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. If it was us or Napa, but since Napa ordered 20,000 of them and I only ordered 200, definitely everybody came to know and figure that Napa was first to market with that compressor, just because they had so much more. So it had a much bigger reach.
It's a bigger company.
Massive company compared to Morphlate. So, but anyways, once I saw that Napa had launched that compressor, I realized that there were some pitfalls to the compressor and white labeling was not a good way to go with these compressors.
Right. And I don't think it was even on your end that some of the problems were happening because you didn't have the volume to it, right?
Yeah.
There was people that were having issues with that compressor, but because so many other people got the maxi, what are they? Maxi tracks ones.
Yep.
That those people really had the failures.
They had a lot of failures, and it wasn't really until Dirt Lifestyle Nate came out and made a bunch of his videos on modding the Napa maxi track compressors that people started realizing, oh, this actually can be a good compressor with some changes.
Sure.
Which I had already realized.
Yeah.
Off of our first run of them.
Yes.
So I actually took that compressor and completely tore the whole thing down. Completely dissected it all. And so I could teach myself how compressors work. They're very similar to engines.
Yeah.
On a vehicle, right? So they have a cylinder, they've got valves, input outlet valves. They've got gaskets, they've got head gaskets, they've got cylinder gaskets, they've got a piston ring, and they have a motor that drives a piston in the cylinder.
Yep.
And so all this goes together very similar to the way an engine does in a vehicle. So I was like, okay, once I started figuring that out, I was like, okay, so the components and the thought process of how to make an engine compressor, an engine cylinder work, can be applied to compressor cylinders. And so I went back to the factory and said, I want to see these changes done to these compressors. You have weak points here, here, here. I want to see these changes. And they were like, okay, we can do those. And I said, cool. And I made a spec call out. And then I also added in pressure cutoff switches to the compressors as well. I added longer hoses off them, USA standard fittings, as well as the changes on the internals. And the next compressor was our first real launch, in my opinion, of the 10.6 regular compressors. And they had all the changes on them that Nate, a few months later, came out with his video.
Oh, yeah.
Except for opening up the valves to be bigger, the inlet valves, and opening up the air filter and the inlet valves to be bigger. That was something I did not do on ours because I didn't want more weather intrusion into the compressor.
Oh, got it.
So, but yeah, when Nate came out with this video and was like, here's what you do to compressors to make these work better. I was like, yeah, that's the 10.6 compressor.
That's what I did.
That's what I did.
Yeah. I just did all that.
So it's kind of cool telling people, it made it a lot easier to educate people now on the difference between Napa's compressor and our compressor.
Yeah.
Because I could say, yeah, Nate's video, that's what we did. We just didn't open up the filters and the inlets. And so that made it a lot easier to educate people. Thank you, Nate. But then we started seeing other companies coming to the game now and launching these same compressors. But what I quickly realized was they were just ordering the Napa compressor, the white labeled version, and not doing their own quality control and spec call outs.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, sweet, man. That's good. I just need to educate people now because they all look the same.
Sure.
But the Morphlate compressors have a lot more different spec callouts on them than what most people out there are just white labeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yours have, the slight upgrades. Yours have these things that you've gone through and edited and changed to make it more superior than the previous one, even though it doesn't appear to be any real different except for maybe the pressure cutoff valve.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that looks different.
So
yeah.
Yeah. And so we went back and through all of that. I was like, okay, now that we have a compressor that puts out the max airflow capacity that 4 tires can accept at a time, and we have a hose kit that can deliver that much airflow capacity or more, I was like, this is pretty awesome. Now we have a good thing going on. I don't know if the system can be made that much better because we're always going to be running 4 tires typically, unless something in off-roading changes and we're no longer running 4 tires, but we're pretty damn close to creating the best performing compressor for off-roading and vehicles.
Sure.
From here, it's just a matter of making the compressor better so that it lasts longer.
Okay.
Because we can air up a set of 35-inch tires now in under 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think you can get that time down anymore because we have a compressor that maximizes 4 Schrader valves,
multiple valve stems.
And the next move would be another valve stem in each tire. So then you can run a 20 CFM compressor, 22 CFM. So that would
but then that would what? It would bring it down to like 2 minutes and it would be almost, you'd be like, it's almost a waste of I mean, it would be very nice to some extent, but you're doing more time of pulling the compressor out and pulling the hose kit out, setting it up and putting it away than it takes to air up your tires.
And typically if you're wheeling with your buddies, you're still gonna be waiting on them anyways.
Yeah, I always do.
So right. So in my opinion, if you can get your total stop time from the time you pull into the parking lot, get out your vehicle and get everything out of the vehicle, air up your vehicle, put everything back away and leave. That's time stopped. If you can keep that under 10 minutes, I'm like, that's the goal to me.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you can, like, if you're say from there, if you can keep it under 8 minutes, congratulations. Like, where you really is that 2 minutes difference really valuable to you?
Somebody,
I guess so. If you can keep it under 5 minutes, maybe. And I'm like, man, but what do you got to do to achieve under 5 minute air ups? Really, the answer is a power tank and monster valves. But I'm like, man, you're going to spend more time setting up the hoses and everything than you will. And it's like, is a 5 minute stop time really that much better? Maybe not. I'm like, when I think about it, when I stop, I like to, and I'm airing up, I like to use that time to stretch out a little bit. Or look over the rig, do a nut and bolt check really quick.
Yeah.
Or in snow wheeling, dig the snow out of my beadlock rings or my wheels. Or
I usually drive Bobcat up onto the trailer and then start airing it up while I'm securing Bobcat to the trailer.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm getting a double bang for the buck, right? I'm airing up and tying it down at the same time.
Yeah. So you can,
and it takes me longer than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
To strap it all down.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, are you really, under 5 minutes is cool, but is it really usable? Is it feasible? Like, are you just going to, is there a point at which too quick is too quick? I don't know. The nice thing about running a quad 4-tire hose system and a 10.6 compressor though, is exactly what you said. You don't have to sit there and monitor every single tire while you're doing it now.
Right.
You can kind of do other things. You still have to pay attention to the air system. You have to be listening to it or know that in roughly 5 minutes, 7 minutes, depending on the size of your tires, 8 minutes, whatever it is, I need to go back and check on it.
Right.
So you're still having to pay attention to it somewhat, but you can do other things.
What about speeding it up by supplying larger hoses?
Good question. So there's some people out there that have tried that, right? They're like, oh no, you want to use a 3/8 ID hose because we use 1/4 inch ID hose.
Okay.
So 1/4 inch ID hose in the way that we have it configured. So we have our air inlet into the manifold and then it splits the air to go out to 2 different hoses.
Yeah.
A 1/4 inch ID hose flows about 9 to 10 CFM of airflow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so by splitting that air down to 2 hoses, our usable airflow capacity is about 20 CFM.
Wow.
In our 4-tire hose kit with a 1/4 inch ID hose. Now, if you're running one singular hose that wraps all the way around the vehicle, then your usable airflow is about 9 to 10 CFM. A 1/4 inch orifice, so say an opening with a larger opening on one side and a larger opening on the other side, will flow about 22 CFM. You like that hand signal I showed?
Yeah, very nice. You're teasing me.
So open airflow through an orifice 1/4 inch ID will be about 22 CFM. But the airflow through a hose is about 9 to 10 CFM.
Interesting. Why is it restricted?
Because there's
because it's a longer stretch. That's a 1/4 inch instead of
essentially. Yeah, you're getting air turbulence, air friction, and turbulence along the edges of the ID.
Okay.
So you could think of it like a river, right? The water in a river will flow faster in the center of the river than it will around the edges and the ground of the river, the bed of the river.
I was literally thinking about swimming in a pool with lanes in a pool.
Yes.
Right. Being a swimming background. If you're swimming, you're creating waves. Those waves then hit the lane line and the lane line bounces it back into you.
Yep.
Right. And it's easiest to swim in the middle of a pool because all those waves continue out, hitting all these lane lines and hitting everybody else in the pool and then hit the wall and then come work their way back in.
Exactly the same thing. It's called turbulence.
Okay.
And that's just fluid dynamics, fluid physics. You get turbulence whenever something is moving through a fluid, the fluid displaces and continue. And then the fluid next to it displaces, the fluid next to that displaces.
Right.
And you get this ongoing chain reaction of displacement. And it results in turbulence.
So a 1/4-inch hose can carry about 9 to 10 CFM.
9 to
we'll
10
just say
CFM.
10.
Let's say 10. Make the math easy.
If we ever do math, yeah.
Yep. So by splitting it into 2 hoses that we do, our airflow capacity of our system is about 20 CFM.
Okay.
So double.
Because it's 10, if you're using a 10-6, it's 10 more or less going into the manifold, but then it splits.
Yep.
Right. So are you actually more or less pushing 5 to each side?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it can accept more because of the split?
Because of the split, yeah.
Okay.
And so if you use 3/8 ID hose, that number actually goes from like 20, say if you have a 2-hose system like ours, that number goes from about 20 CFM. It almost doubles. So it's about 35 to 40 CFM.
Right.
So yeah, you get more airflow down the hoses for sure, but you're still limited at the valve stem as to how much of that airflow can get through. You're not getting 30 to 40 CFM through a valve stem, no matter what you do, through a Schrader valve. But our hoses already, our hose kit is already double the capacity of what the biggest airflow out there is. You'd have to be running off an industrial commercial compressor that has 30, 50 gallon tank at 150, 200 PSI in order to really make use of that much airflow in order to max out our 1/4 inch.
Okay. So going to a larger hose is pointless. Like in theory,
totally pointless.
In theory, you could go to a smaller hose.
In theory, you could. If you wanted to run 1 manifold and 4 hoses off of the manifold, you can go to 1/8 ID hose.
Well, it sounds like you could do it right now because if yours is at 20.
True. Yeah.
Upwards of 20, you could reduce each side to a 1/8, which in theory might cut it in half.
You'd be, I guess you'd be like right at the limit of the compressor and Schrader valves.
Because you need 5 per side. So you could go smaller, but at this point, it's allow for easier airflow. Because if you shrink the hose size, you're going to get more restriction and turbulence.
Yeah.
So you're at a pretty sweet spot.
If 1/4 inch ID seems to be the sweet spot.
Okay.
For airing up a vehicle.
Yeah.
4 tires at a time. So I've seen people go to 3/8. I'm like, you guys haven't done the math. You haven't done the research to figure that out, that all you're doing is making a harder to handle hose, and a heavier hose, bigger packaging. It's going to take up more space in your vehicle. So I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Make your 3/8 hose. I don't care.
Got it.
So anyways, let's see.
So we have a 10.6 compressor that's at pushing more or less 10 CFM, 10.6 CFM. Now we have a quad system, hose system that allows you to push 2 to 2.5, CFM per tire. So you're looking at, 8 to 10 CFM going into the tires. You built a compressor up. You did the upgrade. So now you got a reliable, long-lasting compressor.
Yep. So
what's next?
Now the trick is, it seems like compressors in the off-road space are all judged how good or bad they are based on how quickly they can fill up a tire.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I talked with Nate a little bit about this because he ran his tests with his compressors, that he kind of ran a big, like he put 4 or 5 compressors against each other and all aired up 1 tire at a time. And I'm like, they're all going to be about the same no matter how much airflow they push, because the Schrader valve on the tire is your restriction. So a twin ARB is going to air up a single tire about the same amount of time as a Smitty built single cylinder, or a Morflate 10.6.
Sure.
Because the compressor is not the limiting factor.
Right. The tire is. But everybody judges compressors based on how quickly it takes to air up 1 tire. And I'm like, we need to get away from that in the off-road industry now. We have better compressors out there that you're not telling the whole story by talking about 1 tire at a time. Okay.
We can now air up 4 tires in under 5 minutes. But now I've started thinking about that. I'm like, what does that mean though? Why do people care about the time? They care about the time because it's their time.
Yeah. That's the one thing we have that we try to have control of.
Yes. So what if we can no longer make it about time?
Okay.
So if you can make the compressor or something in the air system manage airing up for you, who cares how long it takes?
Yeah.
It's no longer your time to air up to an extent. I mean, you probably want to get moving at some point and continue back home.
As long as it's not slowing you down.
Exactly. Right. As long as you're not having to sit there and wait on the system. And even then,
or be the last person.
Yes. Yeah. Even then, there's so many people out there that are using like the Milwaukee 18 volt little handheld compressors that put out a quarter of a CFM.
Oh my gosh.
And it takes them an hour to air up, but they can just set it on one tire, hit go, and then have 2 other batteries for their 18 volt. And then they can go and do other stuff. They can make lunch, they can make dinner, they can go hiking, they can do whatever.
Yeah.
If it takes an hour, as long as their activity they're planning on doing takes an hour, who cares?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like, let's make it who cares what time it takes, because it's no longer your time. So we started looking into different ways to accomplish auto inflation.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
In which case, where you are setting the pressure of something where you want it to go to, and it shuts itself off. And my goal was I still wanted it to take under 10-minute stops. So the time it takes to stop, get your stuff out, air up the vehicle, put it all away, and take off, I still want it to be under 10 minutes. So we started playing around with different ways to do that. And I tried 4 or 5 different technologies, different ways to do that, different ways to accomplish it, from analog, digital. We've tried some Bluetooth stuff.
Yeah.
And ultimately we came down to one that I think works really, really well. And it's all built into the compressor. So it's a nice streamlined package, and it's simple. All you do is hit the plus or minus buttons and then hit go. So, and that's the new PSI Pro compressor that we launched in August.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I have my hands on one, right? I don't have to play dumb on this section of the segment. But it's fantastic because it really does. It'll pretty much does eliminate time.
Yeah.
Because now, like I said a little earlier, I pull Bobcat up onto the trailer. I hook up my Morphlate system with the PSI Pro. I tell it to go, and I go do something else. I'm unpacking the rig. I'm loading the other rig. I'm strapping Bobcat down to the trailer, all while it's airing the truck up for me.
Yeah.
And the only thing I need to do is hear when it stays off for an extended period of time, and I go,
oh, it's done.
Oh, it must be done.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just one of those things that you just kind of have your ear going. And I mean, they're loud enough that, it's an audible difference that you're, I don't need to yell at my significant other right now.
Yeah.
So maybe put a muffler on the next one. I don't know. Right.
Yeah. That'd be something.
Yeah. Quiet it down somehow. But eliminating it really is eliminating the time factor.
100%.
Right. Because you are getting your time. You're at the point now where not bending over at every single tire, having to hold the thing on to air up.
That was the 4-tire hose kit.
We're gone from that time now. And then we went to the just regular 10.6, where you now have to slowly come back and check every once in a while to find out. You can
do other stuff, but you still have to check and pay attention to it.
Yeah. You have to come back every minute or 2 minutes or whatever, or let it go for 4 minutes and then come back every 30 seconds to make sure you're at your right pressure.
Yep.
And now we're at a point where you just set it and forget it. It's like Ron Popeil.
Yeah, right? Yeah. George Foreman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I actually looked at trying to trademark that. Or like
forget it.
Set it and forget it, and in our advertising stuff, and it's trademarked by George Foreman.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was Ron Popeil from way back when.
No, George Foreman owns the trademark on that now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if it went up.
Maybe. I wonder if he bought it from him or something. Yeah. So anyways, I was like, so what else do we do? And we're landing on set your pressure. Because I was going to do set your pressure and walk away.
Yeah.
But if you just say set your pressure, people are like, what do you mean? They start asking questions, because this whole concept of not it being about time anymore is such a new concept that still people are like, well, how fast does it go?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's under 5 minutes. It's still fucking fast.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. I don't want you to care about how fast it goes. I want you to be able to set it and then go do something else.
Yeah.
So set your pressure. And then still everybody's like, well, how fast does it go? And I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And where I'm trying to change the way the off-road industry views and thinks about air systems for vehicles now.
Yeah.
And so that's the PSI Pro compressor.
Got it. Cool.
And so the PSI Pro that we launched in August was Gen 1.
Yep.
And kind of a similar thing happened. The fucking factory went and sold them to a bunch of other people.
Yes.
Exact same compressor, different colors.
Yeah.
That's what happened with the Napa MaxiTrack compressor too, right?
Yeah.
So exact same compressor, different colors, went and sold them to a few other people. And so all of us now have the same compressor. And I'm like, well, I had some changes I want to do to these compressors to make them better, make them last longer, make them more durable, make them handle heat better, because it's a dual 60 millimeter piston on one big ass motor. It makes a lot of heat.
Right. Yes, it does.
Luckily, it works so fast that if you have 35, 37 inch tires, the run time typically isn't long enough to create a lot of heat. But if you're running 40s, 42 inch tires, it still gets fairly hot. So I'm like, let's make some changes now that helps handle heat better, manage the heat of these compressors. And so since the same thing happened where our compressor went out to a couple other competitors, I went back to the factory and said, all right, I'm sick and tired of this. We're creating a contract. I'm pulling patents so that even if you do sell in the United States to other people, I'm going to go after them. So they're not going to be able to sell in the United States anymore with our designed stuff. And I have contracts with them now to not sell our stuff. And so, yeah, we're coming out with the Gen 2 compressors now.
Yeah.
Which have stainless steel lines, purge valves on them.
Okay.
Aluminum heat sinks. So, and now there's a connection between the cylinders of the compressor and the aluminum heat sinks. Like that was always a big thing. No matter how tight we made the tolerances, you could never really get the aluminum heat sinks to fit perfectly on the cylinders.
Okay.
So now we're using a heat conductive paste between the cylinders and the heat sinks.
Okay.
So now the heat will come off of the cylinders better and dissipate heat through the heat sinks a lot better too.
Nice.
We're using a different material for the piston ring that can handle abrasion and heat a lot better as well before warping. We're using a slightly different material on the gaskets that can handle heat better as well. So we're making quite a few changes to the Gen 2 compressors, and it's taken a little bit longer to come out with them now, but with them coming out, we should have a compressor that will last substantially longer now. My goal is to get these lasting 3 to 5 years on them, being able to manage the heat better. But it's no longer about your time, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you can just set it and then walk away. And were you doing that for a dual cylinder compressor? And we're doing that with single cylinder 60 millimeters as well. So if you have 33 inch tires and you're like, I don't need to air up my tires in 2 minutes with the 10.6, you can get the 5.6,
right?
And it's 5 minute air up. So, and you save about $100 on them.
Yeah. So
cool. The next move is taking that concept of it not being about time anymore and applying it to different systems now.
Oh,
so just to tease people out there of what's kind of coming down the road for Morphlate here.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
Really
we're trying
cool.
to take away we're trying to save people's time.
Yeah.
It's convenient as hell. It's about as easy as it can get. So I'm like, I don't know how much more convenient we can make it. Let's make it more about saving people time now.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
Yeah.
We're going to need to change the Morphlate slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Saving you time or something.
Saving you time. Yeah.
Just start it.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines.
Yep.
I'll work on a design, or Brian, you can get off.
Yeah.
Get on
right.
it.
So anyways, that's air management systems for off-road world and kind of the evolution of them, I guess.
Yeah.
And how it's worked out from, why would you want to air down in the first place to how do you get back aired up in the most convenient and easy and simple and quickest way possible now.
Right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think we covered a whole bunch of stuff in this episode from, way back when to modern day.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of requests to revisit this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it was
episode 5, I think.
Was it? Yeah, I was going to say 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
And here we are at 451 and we haven't touched this. We've like dabbled in it along the way just with, things that Morphlate was doing.
Yeah.
But, that we needed to throw another dedicated episode out there, 445
episodes later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you have questions out there, something that we didn't talk about, something that we skipped over because we we're just, going down this line of the history of airing up, reach out to us. You can find me at Snail Trail 4x4 on Instagram or Jimmy at snailtrail4x4.com. It's probably better to reach out to Tyler though, because he'll have the better answers. And if you send it to me, I'll just refer it to him.
Yeah.
You can get a hold of Tyler at 4x4 Toyota Tyler on Instagram, or Tyler at Snail Trail 4x4. Or what are some of the Morphlate ones out there that people can get
questions at Morphlate? That'll get you to MF or Sean. There's Tyler at Morphlate. Yeah, those are the 2 main ones for Morphlate.
Yeah. And there's Morphlate on Instagram, which you get connected to the secretary out there if you want to say hi to her. So there's a lot of ways that you can get in contact if you have some questions about air compressors, airing up, PSI pros, maybe he'll even tell you, hint a little bit more about future comings, which I'm
only if you sign an NDA.
Yeah, I'm NDA'd, so I'm not allowed to say anything more than that.
Yep.
Which there's just some super exciting stuff coming. I think
really
I'm allowed to say
things.
that, right?
Yeah, we have some really rad things coming next year. So yeah.
So cool. Also, you can get in contact with us by phoning in area code 916-345-4744.
I love it. So thanks, man. It's been fun letting me nerd out over air stuff.
For sure. Yeah.
Hopefully it wasn't as bad as nerding out over radio stuff for people.
Probably not.
So yeah, if you guys have questions, you want to hear something elaborated on a little bit more from this episode's topic, send them in. We love chatting with people, and we'll talk about it on an episode here. So
sounds good.
Cool. With that, Jimmy, any final words for everybody out there?
I want pressurized cabins or cabs of vehicles now so that we can go up into higher elevations.
Okay, we'll have to work on that. And with that, my friends, keep crawling.
I got one for you.
Ready for jokes?
What did the cranberry say to the turkey?
I don't know what.
Nothing. Cranberries don't talk.
That's dumb.
Have you heard the one, what does one tomato say to the other tomato in the oven?
No.
It says, wow, it's getting hot in here. Second one goes, holy cow, a talking tomato.
Yes, I have heard that one.